Hello folks, in this video we are going to discuss checkboxes. Alright, so checkboxes are fairly easy to handle with Selenium WebDriver. Similar to radio buttons, you may encounter a popular challenge where checkboxes share the same attributes and attribute values. One of the simplest ways to handle checkboxes is to inspect the checkboxes by index. Okay, here's a sample XPath example, similar to radio buttons in the previous video, where we are writing an XPath and we're using the index concept to locate the checkbox we want to locate. Okay. Now, a more complicated but efficient way is to retrieve the checkboxes as a list of web elements and select the checkbox you want by text. Now, we haven't talked about that. We will discuss that when we discuss find elements. Okay, but for now, let's go over to VS Code. So what I've done here is I've created a new class called checkboxes.java. I basically copied some of the code from the radio buttons class, by the way, from the previous video, and I pasted it here. Okay, so same thing again inside the main method. I'm making a reference to the WebDriver interface and the Chrome driver class. We are maximizing the Chrome browser, deleting all cookies. Here I have the URL we've been using. I stored it in a string, and I'm navigating to that website right here. Okay, to this URL. Then here, I'm going to show you different examples where we are handling checkboxes with unique attribute and attribute values. Okay, so here I'm doing driver.findElement by XPath, and here's the XPath I use, by the way. Okay, now I'm using a unique XPath here, nothing complicated. I'm using the value attribute, which is option 1. So if I come back here to the website here, I went ahead and inspected this checkbox right here, and you see that I have the value option 1, which is unique. If you go ahead and expand the labels for the other checkboxes, by the way, so I'll go ahead and expand them like this. Okay, you will see that the value attribute and the attribute values are actually unique. Okay, so it's a very simple XPath to write. So all I'm doing is I'm using this XPath, locating it, and clicking on it. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and run this program, and I'm expecting Selenium to just click on the first checkbox, and it did right there. Okay, now I'm going to stop here and remind you guys that we haven't talked about closing the browser just yet. I promise you it's a very easy concept, but we'll talk about it later because I'd like to show you an example between the difference between driver.close and driver.quit. Okay, now if you're using Windows, just simply exit the browser. If you're using Mac, close the browser, but then you have to go down to your dock and right click and force quit, okay? Because you'll probably see a lot of Chrome icons open up on the bottom, okay? So make sure to force quit those. If not, it's going to eat up a lot of your RAM memory, okay? So anyway, back to this program. So this did what we expected it to do, okay? And I'm gonna go ahead and uncomment these two other statements here, and these two other statements on line 22 and 23, click on the second radio button and then the third radio button as well. Okay, so if I run this program, I'm expecting Selenium to click on the first checkbox, then the second checkbox, then the third checkbox. Okay, so let's go see how that works. I'm gonna go ahead and run this program, and let's see, it may happen very fast. And it did. So it clicked all checkboxes. Okay, and that's another difference between I like to remind you about the difference between checkboxes and radio buttons. With checkboxes, at least with most websites, a user is able to select multiple checkboxes. Okay, and we can also unselect. Okay, that's the thing with checkboxes, they're convenient. With radio buttons though, once you select a radio button, you can't unselect it unless there's been a feature to unselect these radio buttons. Okay, and in most websites, when there are radio buttons, you can really only select one unless the website has been designed otherwise. Okay, now in order to reset this radio button being checked, you would just have to refresh the page, and then everything is just fresh again. Okay, so that's just basically the difference between radio buttons and checkboxes. So let's come back here. So Selenium did what we expected it to do, okay? Let me go ahead and comment these out again. I'm gonna highlight all of them, and I'm using Windows, so I'm going to do Control/. If you're using Mac, it's Command/, and that's how you can comment out multiple lines of code at once, just like this. Okay. Now here I'm handling checkboxes with non-unique attribute and attribute values. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and uncomment line 30, line 31, and line 32. Okay. Just like this. Now, here I am presenting the example, in case there's a scenario where these checkboxes did not have any unique attribute and attribute values. So again, I'm using the index concept here, okay? And I use the name attribute and the checkbox value. If we come back here to the UI, we can look at the HTML information of these radio buttons. Assuming we didn't have ID or value or name, I just used type. You see the type is the same for all three checkboxes, okay? So again, I'm just using this concept. Again, we're specifying by index which one we want to click on. So if I run this program, again, I'm really expecting Selenium to just click on all three checkboxes, okay? So I'm gonna go ahead and, first of all, I'm gonna stop this execution. This may be happening to you right now because we're not officially closing the browser, okay? So I'm gonna go ahead and pause it. And I'm gonna go ahead and run the program again, and let's see what happens, okay? Okay, let's wait for it. Wait for it. Okay, seems like we have an issue here. We're getting a Selenium exception. And let's see what the issue is here. Okay, we're getting a no such element exception. It says unable to locate element with this XPath. So something is wrong with this XPath. Let's check it out. So we're using the input tag name, the name attribute, and the checkbox value. Let's see what's going on here. Okay, and that is true because actually the attribute name is type, and here I'm using name. So let me go ahead and replace this with type. Okay, all of them actually. Type just like this. I'm gonna go ahead and save it. And now we made this update. Let's see, the attribute value is checkbox. I'm just double checking everything. It is. And then we are also using the index concept here. The tag name is input. I'll go ahead and double check that as well. And it is input right here for all these checkboxes, okay? So I needed to make that modification. I'm gonna go ahead and save this and run this program. Let me stop this and run again. Okay, and let's see if these radio buttons get selected, and they do. Okay, so we haven't talked about exceptions yet, but I wanted to do that to show you what you should do if you get a no such element exception. Sometimes we need to go back and double check that the XPath we wrote is correct. Okay, and in that case, that's what we did here. So anyway, let's recap checkboxes here again. Okay, so checkboxes are fairly easy to handle with Selenium WebDriver. Similar to radio buttons, you may encounter a popular challenge where checkboxes share the same attributes and attribute values. Okay, one of the simplest ways to handle checkboxes is to inspect the checkbox by index. And here's the sample XPath example. As we already discussed, we did use the index concept to locate these checkboxes. Okay, now we did discuss that in the later videos. We're going to talk about find elements and so on. Okay, so this is actually a very popular interview question. I'd like to kind of just give you some hints. Again, at the end of the series, you'll find all the interview questions and answers that we have with real-time examples. But a lot of interviewers like to ask, like, hey, what would you do if you have several radio buttons or checkboxes on a web page, and I want to select one of them, but they all have the same attribute and attribute values? How would you select those, right? And then you need to mention the index concept, okay? The index XPath concept, and you should be good to go.